Date 2017, approximately 4 o'clock. And we're here for a dangerous property hearing for 9084 Arrowhead Court. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. McFarland.
Present.
Mr. Hanwell.
Present.
Mr. Burning.
Present.
All trustees are present.
I would also like to note our legal advisor, Laura Abrams, our developmental service director, Chris Filbert, Chief of the Fire Department, Rob Lanigan, are also present. I'd like to note, is there anyone present that would like to address the board?
Bill Swan.
Come up to the podium, state your name and address, sir.
Okay. My name is Bill Swanton. I live at 950 Laurel Avenue in Glendale, and I am interested, and I'm renting that property. And I'm interested in the dangerous property at 9084 Arrowhead. I've been doing some research on the property since March. I reached out to Judith Cordays. She is actually the sister that the only surviving member of the family. And I've done a title search on the property. I was prepared to purchase the property at the sheriff's sale in June, and it was pulled. I've made several attempts to contact the lawyers involved in the proceeding, and because I am not related or have investment in that property, they weren't able to share the information that I really need, and that is the bank and the person at the bank, U.S. Bank, I believe, and now holds the title to it, to try to negotiate, purchase the property, fix it up, and use that as my permanent residence. So I do have a little timeline. If you want any copies of that, I'd be glad to give you a copy.
Well, actually, our concern really, I mean, all we're trying to do here is give ourselves, we have to have a waiting period after we decide that it needs to be demolished. And if you can work something out, I mean, it's not like we don't want it to be a home or anything. We're not against that. It's just that in the state that it's in, we consider it a dangerous property. We have to go ahead and decide here that, you know, it is a dangerous property. And if you can work something out to purchase it, I assume that would be fine with the board.
That would be fine with me. Chris, what would be the timeline if the board were to go ahead and declare this a dangerous property and pass a resolution later this evening?
At a minimum, it would be 30 days from tonight's date, from today. At a minimum. That's the minimum time we would have to notify the property owner and any lien holders of record before we would actually demolish it. But it could technically be longer, but no sooner than 30 days from today.
So right now, this property's in a bank foreclosure or tax foreclosure? Bank.
The taxes have been paid, and they are cutting the grass, at least in the front. And my understanding is that Judith Cordays did an abandoned title, and everyone participated and agreed to the abandoned title. And the bank, my understanding, was going to accept title. In lieu of the title, they would get the actual cash value of the insurance. And the actual cash value of the insurance was approximately $65,000. I'm talking with Chris, we're not sure where that money is, but I would think that they would satisfy them.
How much is their mortgage? How much is
mortgage? There was 2 mortgages, and it was approximately $126,000.
The mortgages, that's probably including late fees and everything else. The auditor has it at $106,000. I have the auditor's say.
has the auditor's fair
The
market
auditor has
value?
his fair market value at $106,000.
Okay.
Exactly, 106,800. Lands 38.4, properties 68.4.
And the sheriff's sale was, the starting bid was $20,000. And talking with Chris, I mean, I'm glad to see that you're having this meeting, and hopefully with the outcome of that meeting will force the lawyers and the bank to hopefully get together with me and say, look, we've got to do something. Otherwise, Springfield Township is going to demolish the property.
And it's worth less.
Yeah, obviously.
Plus that goes on the tax.
So if you could keep working with Chris and, and try to figure out, we do know that in foreclosures, it's very difficult to find somebody at the bank that will actually speak to you about a specific property. It's kind of like merry-go-round as far as who's going to make the decision. So if you could just keep Chris in the loop, and we'll try to, if you make some progress, we'll try to help any way we can.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the help of Chris and Kathleen have been working with Springfield Township. It's great to be back in the area. I grew up just one street over, 2 streets over, Vincent's Court, back in the late 60s, early 70s, worked at Brentwood, Texaco, my first job. So Springfield Township has come a long way. It's a beautiful building. So a lot of good things. All the park back here is great. So
Do you intend to demolish it or renovate
no,
it?
I intend to renovate it and use it as my primary residence. I've got 3 brothers and 3 sisters. Most of them live outside Cincinnati. My mom lives at Maple Mill now. She's 92. So when they come in, they have a place to stay. And that makes it close for me to be able to visit with her and make sure that she's in good health.
And Bill, you have specific plans? I mean, you've seen the house and you have estimates and plans as to how you'd renovate it, or, I mean, this is something that's economically feasible?
Yes, I think so, because I would be doing a lot of the work myself, obviously have it inspected and permitted and all of that, going through those processes, but I've restored a few homes myself, along with a good friend of mine, about my same age, and so yeah, I look forward to hopefully purchasing the property, fixing it up, and maybe inspiring other people in the neighborhood to do the same.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's no one present on behalf of the owners or any lien holders of record. So Laura, were proper notices sent to all parties?
Yes, we had the certified mail, we had the resolution declared dangerous on 6/13/17. The certified mail letter with that resolution attached was addressed, sent to all the title search, people discovered on the title search owners of the bank with the hearing date and time on July 24th of 17. We also posted that notice on the property on July 25th of 17. And the legal ad was run on July 26th of 17.
And the hearing date, location, and time were published in the newspaper of general circulation in the township.
It was?
Would you please recount the facts and procedural postures of this case?
This case started, I believe, with a fire in November 24th of 15, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And it was a fire in which the occupant died, the owner occupant died in the fire. It was a very tragic occurrence. The fire chief did inspect the property on several occasions, and I'll defer to him to tell you exactly what he saw, but those inspections took place at various points. I have October 12th of 16. I believe we have a date in May as well of this year for a follow-up, and determined that this property was uninhabitable and dangerous at the time. At that point, the board did pass a resolution finding it to be a dangerous property and basically setting forth a date for this hearing.
Thank you. Chief Leininger, could you please describe the current conditions of the property and if any steps have been taken to repair or remove the dangerous property condition?
Yes, sir. I visited the property again today, and there have been no changes as previously reported. The property has been professionally boarded up so that's a good thing. But there is, it continues to deteriorate. I did speak with a couple neighbors. They are very interested, obviously, in our hearing today, and would like to see some type of action taken to obviously resolve this situation. They have been very patient up to this point, but I think that's running a little thin. So they're anxious to see something done with this property. But my recommendation still stands. I still believe it is a dangerous property and should be mitigated accordingly.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief Lyon, could you just specify exactly what damage there is to this property? You said it's damage condition, but what exactly are you looking for?
Well, I believe there's structural damage there. And the previous report that I submitted shows that there was considerable damage to what I consider the den area, which is adjacent to the sunroom. The fire vented out the back and got up into the roof joists and the roof decking itself. So it is an unstable structural condition in a portion of that building or that structure. And then plus it's just uninhabitable. There was considerable amount of smoke and heat damage as well as water damage. And anytime that there's water there, there's the possibility of mold. And plus it's been sitting vacant since November 24 of 2015. Even though we did make attempts to board up the structure, I'm sure that there's been vermin and other types of animals have breached the security and are taking liberties inside that building.
Did the board have an opportunity to look at the pictures?
Yes, I have.
Sure. And you have Chief Leininger's reports, I believe.
I also have updated photographs for the record to share with the board today, if you like.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing portion of our meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is closed.
Chief, is this from today?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Begin the public hearing for 234 Beach Ridge Drive. It's August 8th, about 4:20 p.m. We're here for a dangerous property hearing for 234 Beach Ridge Drive. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. McFarland?
Present.
Mr. Honolo?
Present.
Mr. Burning?
Present.
All trustees are present.
I would also like to note that our legal advisor, Laura Abrams, our developmental services director, Chris Gilbert, and the chief of our fire department, Rob Leininger, are also present. Are there any property owners here? I would like to note that there's no one present on behalf of the owner or any of the lien holders of record. Ms. Abrams, were proper notices sent to all parties?
They were. We sent the certified letter on this one on July 24th, and the property was posted on July 25th of this year. The dangerous property condition was declared on June 13th.
And the hearing date, location, and time were published in a newspaper of general circulation in the township?
It was on July 26th.
And would you please recount the facts and procedural postures of this case?
This case is also alleged to be a dangerous property condition on the basis of a fire. This fire took place on April 1st of 2017. And there was significant property damage, I believe. I should confirm with this one that the trustees all have copies of this property as well.
Correct.
And the reports from Chief Leininger, I believe are also given to you as well. Or you've seen them. And it's my understanding that there's been inspections of this property since that date as well, and I'll let Chief Leininger discuss that. but that the property condition remains dangerous. This one involved 80% of the property being damaged by the flame and water, so this is a significant fire incident as well.
Thank you, Laura. Chief Leininger, could you please describe the current condition of the property and if any steps have been taken to repair or remove the dangerous property condition?
Yes, sir. I inspected the property again today on August the 8th, 2017, and I did take updated photographs as well, which I will submit. The property continues, in my opinion, to be unsafe and uninhabitable. On August the 1st, there was a fire. At that time, the structure did sustain significant structural damage. Oh, I'm sorry, that was April the 1st. April the 1st. Significant structural damage. Matter of fact, upon arrival of the first engine company, the first floor had actually dropped into the basement. And then the fire then continued to consume a large portion of the structure. There has been no effort on the part of the property owner to do anything to try and minimize the risk or the danger, and that's obvious from the pictures taken, the updated photographs taken as well. We had considered even contracting a board-up company to try and minimize the risk to the neighborhood, but as you can see, there's really not much left of the structure itself. So my recommendation is that the property be declared unsafe and that it should be condemned and demolished as soon as possible.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have a motion to go forward with the demolition of the property at 234 Beach Ridge Drive?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, do we have a motion to close the public hearing portion of the meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
With that, the public hearing for 230.
You actually need to declare the property.
Yeah, declare it dangerous property, not just the demolition. Declare it
Okay, do I have a motion to declare that the property is in dangerous condition and will immediately enforce its previously enacted by removing the dangerous property condition upon the given a 30 days written notice to the owner?
That's appropriate.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second. I have a question. So within 30 days, this property will be demolished?
Not within, after 30.
After 30?
Yeah, we will legally be allowed to enter the property and perform the demolition work 30 days from today. Now, it may not be exactly 30 days. Obviously, that's going to be subject to the availability of the contractor to pull permits to cap the sewer, various other things, disconnect utilities. So it will be sometime 30 days after today.
Okay, thanks.
So next, do we have to declare it, to tear it down? That's in the
That's a resolution.
resolution.
Just to be clear, the resolutions at the end of this, at the end of the regular meeting tonight, purely are to amend the previously enacted resolution to specify which contractor will be on the property to perform the demolition. The purpose of obviously this hearing tonight or today is to reaffirm your previous decision declaring it dangerous property and to further proceed with the actual demolition.
Did you actually vote on that motion? I'm sorry.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Thank you.
Joe motioned, Gwen seconded, and they all said yes.
Yep.
With that, the public hearing for 234 Beach Ridge Drive is now closed. The equalization hearing for Wyoming Point will begin at 4:45. Approximately 4:45 p.m., we're here for the Wyoming Point public hearing. This public hearing is to consider any objections regarding assessment amounts for the Wyoming Point Improvement Project. Mr. Burning, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. McFarland?
Present?
Mr. Honolulu?
Present.
Mr. Burning?
Present.
All trustees are present.
Thank you. I would like to turn the meeting over to Township Administrator Mike Henkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Burning. This public hearing is required by ORC 5571.07 and 5573.01 and 5573.10. We did give notice of this hearing in compliance with the Sunshine Law. The Wyoming Point Place Improvement Project actually involves a partial concrete curb replacement and resurfacing with 2 inches of new blacktop on Wyoming Point Place. It is the only street that is in this particular improvement project. This is the 4th assessment project the township is moving forward with in accordance with the 5-year infrastructure improvement plan that was adopted by the board as part of our neighborhood comprehensive master plan, which was adopted in May of 2016. And as you may recall, there are sort of 2 types of assessments in our comprehensive infrastructure improvement plan. One are voluntary, the other being what we deem as required, and this falls into the category for voluntary, as these are projects generally. These roads are rated in fair condition, and so those types of assessments are generally considered voluntary by the neighborhood. So we did have a public hearing with the residents of this neighborhood back in February the 2nd of this year, and following that public hearing, it was determined that the vast majority of residents that attended were in favor of this, and that they then went out and, given the voluntary nature of it, circulated petitions to residents in this neighborhood. There were a total of 14 residents that signed the petition, and that represents at least 51% of the property owners as required to be assessed for this project. I believe there's a total of about, like, 20 actual properties back there. The assessment to each property owner for this project will be $87.13 for a period of 10 years. And that is apportioned and paid equally by the property owners abutting the road improvement as established by ORC 5573.07A1. The petitions were then submitted to the Board of Trustees on February the 28th, 2017, and subsequently the board then passed Resolution 31, 2017 on March 14th of this year, which was a resolution determining the necessity for road improvement as requested by the petitioners. And essentially, that is the project's go-ahead, and it did go forward on that basis. Plans and specifications and a schedule of assessment were then prepared, and they were reviewed and approved by the county engineer as required by statute as well. This hearing was given notice in newspaper of general circulation on both July the 19th and July the 26th, stating that individuals, residents, could either appear in person to make comments and or state any objections, or to submit written objections. And again, the purpose of this hearing is to consider objections to the schedule of assessment. So in many ways, this is sort of an equalization hearing. It's really not to determine whether or not to do the project or do assessments, but whether those assessments, as we've apportioned them, are fair and equal. As of today, we have received no written comments, and obviously looking out into the audience, I don't see anyone here today. But the next steps following this hearing, unless the board were to make any changes to the way the assessments have been prepared, would be to adopt the estimates and specifications as reported by the county engineer for the said improvements, and there is a resolution for that, Resolution 74, 2017, which will be considered by the board as part of your regular meeting tonight. The only other piece of information is that we did, as I mentioned, after we had the resolution back in March, we did move forward, and the project was a bid opening was conducted by the township on May the 9th. Trustees did award that on the June 13th. So at this point, we're sort of scheduled to move forward with this project, I believe in September, late September, October.
That is correct.
Correct. So that is all I have, unless the board has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock.
Welcome.
Is there anyone in attendance this afternoon who'd like to make an objection to the method in which the assessment was determined? Sir, could you come up to the podium?
Kevin, this is the Wyoming point. This is not for your subdivision.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So,
Excuse me.
yeah, he's here for the next one.
Oh, okay. If there are no objections, I'd like to open the discussion to the board for deliberation. Anybody have any comments?
Well, I think the only comment is this is similar to what we've done in the past with the other assessment projects in the township. I think that the methodology that we've adopted here is the fairest way that we can do it, to all the residents. And, as really for all these projects so far, they've been overwhelmingly popular with the residents as a way to get your street fixed and get it fixed right away at a reasonable cost that is for a limited period of time. So, and particularly since there's no one here, the record should reflect there's no one here, so I, think we'll want to proceed on with this at the regular meeting.
I think it was a good way to get the community and the residents involved in the process, and by doing that, getting them involved, that helped them to buy in and understand better the process. Otherwise, I don't think we would be where we are today. And when you see that individuals in the community took on the role and responsibility of actually circulating the petition, that to me says a lot as well.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, 14 signed the petition, but I think they ended up with 100% of the people in agreement on this particular project.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other further deliberation, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn the Wyoming Point public hearing.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is closed.
The Wyoming Point public hearing is now closed.
One point of clarification, my mistake, actually 19 signed.
Well, I think when they were done, even the ones that didn't sign it had agreed.
I think it was 19. There was an extra sheet on the back that I didn't see.
Oh,
I thought it
okay.
ended there.
I know they told me, somebody who
Yep.
was there told me they ended up with 100% of the people.
So
Yeah, there were 19.
So the correction is 19.
19
Yes.
signed it,
And
the
100
other
people
people
supported
agreed,
it.
yeah.
Yep. 19 out of the 20.
Approximately 5 p.m. on August 8, 2017. I'd like to call to order the public hearing to consider any objections regarding assessment amounts for the Millbrook Improvement Project. Mr. Burning, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. McFarland? Mr. Honolo?
Present.
Mr. Bernie?
Present.
All the trustees are present.
I'd like to turn the meeting over to Township Administrator Mike Hinnenkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Burning. As in the previous public hearing we had, this public hearing is required by Ohio Revised Code, Section 5571.07, 5573.01, and 5573.10. Township did give notice of this hearing in compliance with the Sunshine Law. The Millbrook Improvement Project involves partial concrete curb replacement and pavement preservation resurfacing with Cape Seal black mat on the following streets: Timber Mill Court, Streambrook Drive, Allen Crest Court, Shady Oak Court, Thomas View Court, Leebrook Drive, Ashford Court, Gale Crest Drive, and Viewcrest Drive. It also includes pavement resurfacing with 1 1/2 inches of new blacktop on the following streets, and that would be Millbrook Drive, Woodfield Drive, and Leebrook Drive. This marks the 5th assessment project that the township is moving forward with in accordance with our 5-year infrastructure improvement plan that was adopted as part of the Neighborhood Comprehensive Master Plan by the board back in May of 2016. And I mentioned this is the 5th, but I would say this is the largest of the assessment projects that we have done to date. And as the board may recall, there's two different types of assessment projects. There's what we consider to be mandatory. Those are the ones that are done in conjunction with a SCIP project. That is not the case here. This would be considered a voluntary assessment project. We did discuss this option with the residents of the neighborhood during a public meeting that was held back on January the 26th of 2017, and I believe there were about 70 to 80 members of the neighborhood present for that meeting. And following that meeting, it was general consensus from those in attendance that this was a good idea to move forward, and so residents then circulated petitions in their neighborhood requesting that these road improvements take place. I believe there was a total of 129 signatures of roughly the 237 residents, so represented more than 51% of the property owners to be assessed for the project, which is required by law. The assessment that is being proposed and will be apportioned to each of the property owners is $84.24 per year, and that will be done for a 10-year period and paid equally by the property owners abutting the road improvement as established by ORC 5573.07A1. Petitions were then submitted to the Board of Trustees in February the 28th of this year. The board then passed Resolution 28, 2017. We're doing that on March the 14th of this year, and that was a resolution determining the necessity for road improvement as requested by the petitioners, which essentially was the go-ahead for the project. As a result of that, plans and specifications and a schedule of assessment were prepared, and they were then reviewed and approved by the county engineer's office as again required by the Ohio Revised Code. We did give notice of this particular hearing here today on July the 19th and 26th in a newspaper of general circulation, and that notice basically alerts residents that they have the opportunity to appear either in person or to submit written comments and or objections to the way the assessments are being proposed. So again, the purpose of this hearing is really not to discuss the concept of assessments or even this particular project, but whether they are being assessed fairly as applied in this particular case. So in effect, this is an equalization hearing, and for the board to consider whether those assessments as proposed are equitable. We have received two letters, one from Milton Foreman, who resides at 9542 Galecrest. He had several concerns regarding the equity of the project, primarily because in this particular case, and as the board heard, there are two different types of treatment options to the streets. All of the streets are getting curb repair as needed, but then in some of the, I would guess you would say most of the cul-de-sac streets or the less traveled streets in the subdivision, they are getting a pavement preservation process known as Cape Seal and Black Mat. And then the main streets, sort of the Millbrook, Woodfield, and Leebrook, which technically aren't collector streets, but in this subdivision act as sort of the collector streets where everybody filters out of, they're getting 1.5 inches. Mr. Foreman's concern was sort of the equity in that everyone is paying the same price. However, these streets are getting 1.5 inches of asphalt. These streets are getting, sort of a pavement treatment program, which is not as thick of a product. The lifespans are close. One is the pavement treatment is about 10 years. The asphalt probably closer to 12 to 15 years, but everybody's paying the same. So that was essentially his argument. He had some questions regarding the assessment in general. We did have the opportunity, Mike and Chris and I did meet with Mr. Foreman today, and we had a good meeting, and I think at the end of it, we were able to explain why this was done and how it was prepared and designed and how these things were discussed during the public hearing. and that the residents had an opportunity at that meeting to sort of weigh in on how they wanted it to do in the fairness. And also, and Mike pointed this out, one of the things that while there's different pavement treatment options being done, as it turns out, if you sort of add up all of the curb work on the streets that are getting the pavement preservation product, those streets actually have more curb work. So from a money standpoint, if you equal all the project out, it is a much more equitable situation. And then, there's sometimes you have some of those smaller streets have fewer people that are paying into it, so it's sort of, that's the whole reason that it was done as an entire neighborhood, and, from our standpoint, it was fair. Much more complicated than we've had on some of the other projects, but it was, in fact, fair. So I think he left very satisfied and just urged the board. He thought, if we could do an FAQ and send that out to the neighborhood, it might be helpful for others who might feel the same way about that. So we're in the process of doing that, and we will send that out a few weeks before the project starts, just so everybody understands that. The other letter we did receive this afternoon is from Kevin Holthouse. Mr. Holthouse lives down on Paul Farm Lane, 9730, which actually is a private drive, and obviously Mr. Holthouse is present, so I won't steal his thunder, but we do have a letter expressing some concerns regarding the same issue, the equity of the assessment, but from a little different perspective, and that is that there are residents on a private drive that are going to be paying the assessment, yet not really receiving the benefit directly on that private drive, and just some of the just and equitable issues that arises. But I'll let him certainly address those comments directly to the board. Following tonight's hearing, there is a resolution, so unless the board makes adjustments to those assessments, in this hearing, there'll be a resolution later adopting the estimates and specifications reported by the county engineer, and that is Resolution 75-217, which the board will take into consideration later. Like the other projects, this was all bid back on May the 9th of this year, and the township did award that bid on June the 13th. And that was not only for this project, but also for the Winton Road project with the county, and also the Wyoming Point project.
Thank you, Mr. Hinnenkamp. Is there anyone in attendance this afternoon that would like to make an objection to the method in which the assessment was determined? Just come on up to the podium. And if you could talk into the mic, sometimes gets a little far away.
Okay. My name is Kevin Holthouse. I appreciate you letting me speak.
Kevin, what's your address?
Excuse me, 9730
9730, thank you.
Paul Farm. I've been a member. I've lived in Millbrook subdivision since 1984, so I've been there a good many years, or 83. I've lived on Paul Farm for about 16 years, I believe it's been. And I think I speak for most of the people on Paul Farm Lane that we all approve of the projects. It's not that. We just would like for the township to, it's always a sore point that we have to pay separate to get our street plowed, which we understand it's a private street, and we can live with that. We just want to be sure that there's no way with this assessment that we couldn't get some kind of consideration, because our street needs to be resealed just like all the others. If there's anything the township could do to help us either through our assessment or whatever it is. Mr. Hinnenkamp and Mr. Gold are meeting with us this week to discuss our concerns and what have you. I just wanted to go on record that we do have concerns. And at the same time, I want to be clear that I think every single person on the street favors the project and appreciates what you're doing for the subdivision. We just want whatever consideration there might be. So thank you.
Thank you for coming out, Kevin.
Mr. Burning, the one thing I would add, we are going to, Mike and I are going to have a meeting with the residents on Paul Farm this Thursday evening.
How many families are on Paul? Are we talking about?
Seven homes that are back there. One of the ideas that we had was to reach out to the contractor for this project and talk to them about, while you're doing this project for the township, there's a private project that we'd like you to take a look at. And we're in the process of getting estimates from that contractor to do some of that work. Mike, I don't know if you want to add, but the idea being is that, anytime you have economy of scale, it's a quantity issue. So we can get a much cheaper rate while we're doing a project because of the economy of scale and the actual quantities for asphalt and different materials.
That's exactly right. However, good for the residents that live on Paul Farm. The pavement for Paul Farm Lane is in a lot better condition than Woodfield, Millbrook. So for that contractor to come in and resurface similar to what they're going to be doing on Woodfield, probably be not only pretty expensive, but more than what it needs. So on Thursday night, we're going to talk about some options that we're working on that we think that equates more to what the actual surface, the pavement needs on Paul Farm Lane.
So the other option would be, as we talk about those options, one of the things that Mike and I have talked about, and that would be depending on what the residents back there, what option they chose. If they wanted a repaving of the street, obviously that's not something the township can do. But if they are talking about crack seal, maybe some millwork, maybe some patching, more of, I don't want to call it so much pothole, but there is some breakage, some subgrade deterioration. Is that something that the township can self-perform and then bill those property owners directly? And that's something that Laura and I are going to review. I know, that's something the township can do for snow removal. It's an option that's permitted under the law, that if you have a private street, those residents can contract with the township to have us plow that snow and actually salt that street, but they have to pay for it.
Right.
Because it is private. I mean, and while I would agree, Paul Farm, for the most part, to the naked eye, looks like any other street. It's a little more narrow than some streets. Most people don't know that that's private, and it doesn't feel private in the sense that, it kind of flows with the rest of the neighborhood, where some of them are, but in all intent, it's really just a driveway. It's a shared long driveway, no different than any other residence driveway, and while we are sympathetic to that and we'd love to do it, legally we can't spend township funds on private property. So there would have to be some type of arrangement. Kevin, what I think I hear you saying is, or at least maybe asking is, if there was such an arrangement where, okay, we determine there's some amount and what the treatment is, could that be added to the assessment? And I guess the question, Laura, is I don't think it could be at this juncture without pulling it out and redoing it or doing a separate assessment, right?
Yeah, you don't have an ability.
And we wouldn't even have
assess
the
on a
ability to
private
do
road.
that because it's private.
Right.
So we couldn't do the assessment privately. And I did talk to one of your neighbors,
Legally, we
Henry
can't.
Chani. I mean, it would make sense to be able to do it that way, but yeah, that would be
Yeah, you can.
the concern.
Yeah, the
So-
assessment's only for public roads.
So my question, if there is an opportunity, for the township and the residents back there, the seven, say they would pay for snow removal and et cetera, will the equipment get down there and be able to turn around and get back up out
Yeah,
of it?
we'd have to talk about that issue on snow removal. I think the issue, and I don't even know if they're talking about snow removal at this point, but at this point, I think we're really speaking about the public improvement,
Right.
some kind of repair to the road or sealer, things like that. So we're going to delve into that a little bit more Thursday night with those residents.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Kevin.
If there are no further objections, I'd like to open the discussion if anybody on the board would like to say anything else.
If I could just add,
Or Laura?
or Laura, thank you. I would just say I reviewed the written objections, and they're global objections. They don't really ask the board to change their particular assessments. So in that regard, there's really no request for you to change particular assessments. So, but technically, you need to deny the objections. or accept the objection, so we would want to do some sort of motion to either approve or deny these, but they're just objecting generally. But technically, what this is for is for someone to come forward and say, I think the assessment on my property is too high for some reason, and then the board considers that and decides whether, the benefit or the burden to that property is greater or lesser than those that have also been assessed. So you don't really have that in this situation. You just have almost a philosophical disagreement on the methodology.
Mr. Foreman, they're mostly questions.
And they were. It's not technically even an objection. But given that it is, we're here on objections, that you should rule one way or the other on the objections. And then later in the meeting, you'll either affirm or not affirm the assessment schedule as it was written.
But are they objections?
Technically, they're global objections. They're not what the hearing presupposes you to do, but...
So they don't fit in with the scope of the purpose of the hearing?
They're broader than that. They're not actually requesting a reduction of their particular assessment. So I think you could just do a global finding that there's no objection to the assessment, and if you want to keep the assessment schedule it is, do that. But I think you should take some action on it, since it is technically an objection.
With that, then, I would make a motion that we find that these are not specific objections as it relates to this hearing, and we would go forward with the resolution later at our next meeting.
And I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
If there's no further deliberation, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn the Millbrook public hearing.
So moved.
Second it?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The Millbrook public hearing is now closed. We'll resume at 5:30 for our regular scheduled trustee meeting.